Good morning. I'd like to welcome you here today to the final day of the Center for Innovation's Fall Forum, sponsored by Bosch. We've had an amazing 2 days, beginning with a deep conversation about building under siege with Ukrainian leaders. Yesterday, we spoke with leaders from Bosch about how this global company keeps innovation at its core. If you missed either of these conversations, you can find them on YouTube via the Center for Innovation's website, centerforinnovation.org, or on Spotify if that's where you get your podcasts. Over the last year, Center for Innovation has rebranded and also kept our passion for sharing innovation stories about people, process, and the planet. Our mission remains the same. We are dedicated to improving the built environment and inspiring innovation. Thank you to all of us who inspire us every day with your stories. Today, I'm honored to introduce you to a Center for Innovation board member extraordinaire, Patricia Tillman. She's the Senior Manager for Lean Project Development at the Boldt company. Patricia will moderate today's conversation, which we are calling Innovation 2050, Building Owners' Perspectives. Patricia will introduce you to our esteemed panel that includes Center for Innovation board members. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Margie. It's such a privilege to me to be moderating this panel on innovation with my esteemed colleagues from the Center of Innovation. So in the Center of Innovation, we may come from different backgrounds, but there is one question that drew us all into this single place, which is how can we accelerate innovation in the AEC industry? Our mission in the Center for Innovation is really to be a catalyst to improve the built environment and inspire innovation. And we hope that this conversation today will offer some insights from a building owner's perspective into a few fundamental questions. One of them is like, how do we envision our world and our industry to be in 2050? And how will these changes impact us as a human being, right? And as professionals. So with that in mind, what should we be thinking now to set the right path towards the future that we want? So I wanted to let you know that we're going to be collecting questions throughout the panel discussion, and then towards the end, we'll have some time to discuss them. We have here today with us 3 amazing participants. They are true visionaries and change agents within their organizations. They are engaged in addressing climate change issues and tough social justice challenges. They are also have challenged and transformed their entire procurement strategies within their organizations, as well as dissolved traditional silos among companies and even within their own. So we have here today Angel Dizon. Angel Dizon works for the U.S. General Services Administration, where he's the Regional Commissioner for Public Building Services in the Great Lakes region. They provide workspace for more than 50,000 federal employees in 972 federally owned and leased buildings within 6 states bordering the Great Lakes. He has over 30 years of global real estate planning, design, construction, and maintenance expertise in both private and public sectors. Oh, wow. Welcome, Angel. We also have here Kristine, Kenney. She's a dedicated and accomplished Stuart at the University of Washington campus, where she directs the planning and physical development of the built environment. She has a strong commitment to solving complex issues through creative solutions, and she's adept at strategically navigating and cultivating cross-functional discourse among campus leaders, trade experts, and design professionals to effectively balance limited resources with unlimited ambitions. Welcome, Kristine. And finally, we have Stuart Eckblad, which is sitting by my side, pointing to him. So Stuart is the VP for major capital construction projects at UCSF Health. He has dedicated his career in pioneering concepts of integrated project delivery in the public sector. Stuart currently leads the very first full IPD project for the University of California in San Francisco, which is the $4 billion Parnassus Heights Hospital program. Stuart is the founder of the Center for Innovation, and he currently serves as the president. So welcome, Stuart, as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's such a pleasure again. And to start off, I would like you guys to expand a little bit on your background with the following question. So how did you get to the Aec industry, and especially in the owner side? And why do you stay? So Angel, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. So I went to school to be an architect because that's what my dad told me to do. And so I did it. And when I graduated, I was focused on being a design architect because that was also what I was told to do. And what I realized really quick was bad owners make bad buildings. And what I mean by that is they just make bad decisions because they're uninformed and uneducated about what's possible in that realm. And so at some point, one of my clients was the State Department. And one of the folks that I was working with says, why don't you work with us and help us figure out how to do embassies and consulates? And I thought, well, what a terrible idea that is. I don't want to work for the government. I don't think it's the right role for me. But I said, I'll do it for a little bit and maybe I can market back services to the State Department. And when I got in there, what I figured out was that, you know, if you get a really strong, educated client, they can allow architects to do the kinds of things that are necessary to provide the kinds of buildings that you need. Because one of the challenges that owners have is they ask for what they want, but sometimes they don't get what they need. And so that's how it started for me. And as I've been in government now for like 17 years, what I've realized is that government can do really great things in partnership with industry. And if I think about the things that the government has done, like, you know, going to the moon or the interstate highway system or like the transcontinental railroad or something like that, they can do really great things. They just need to want to do it and then find the right people to do it. And so that's why I'm here. That's why I continue to be on this side. Is I really believe in the power of public buildings and public spaces, and beyond the buildings that we produce, I know that they can have impacts in those communities from an economic, environmental, and social perspective. So that's why I continue to do this.
That's awesome. Kristine.
Sure. So how I got into this, you know, growing up, I was always designing and making things and seemed to thrive on that creative problem solving process. So pursuing both degrees in architecture and then in landscape architecture, it was just a natural progression of putting these skills to work. After working in the private sector for a number of years, designing outdoor environments for colleges and universities nationally and abroad, the opportunity to shift to the client side presented itself, and it had always intrigued me and was something that I thought eventually I would do, maybe to retire into. I came a little sooner than I expected, but I took on the role of university landscape architect at the University of Washington 16 years ago, and that position has evolved and changed over many, many years. But what interests me about working at an institute of higher education is that you are constantly surrounded by the brightest minds in the world, right? Doing research on absolutely everything to solve the world's problems. And so that's what inspires me and keeps me working here. And it's that ability to coalesce around problems rather than around disciplines, and the opportunity to really partner, as Angel said, with you know, a wide range of individuals. And to reiterate what Angel said as well, is that from an owner's side, it's really where the decisions are made, right? It's where the problems are defined, and it's that ability to really have impact in making and affording change.
Thank you. Stuart?
Sure, thank you. So I think the story is similar in that, you know, I got my degree in architecture. I'm a licensed architect. And I thought I was similar to Angel. I thought I was going to be a designer and going to save the world. And But then I realized as I was saving the world, it was taking way too long. This is a free computer, so drawing was took forever and wasn't quick enough. Ideas were too slow to mature, so I got a little frustrated with that. So I went on to study psychology and physiology to how people responded to the physical environment, and got into the side of healthcare, which is where I am now as an owner, realizing that I could make a bigger contribution on the owner side by having the opportunity to hire architects and contractors and focus specifically on how do we influence health, so that I could move much. I could make a greater impact than just a single project at a time. So and that's why I stay, because I think our purpose of healing people is a great mission, and so that's why I stay in this movement. And the owner side gives me that opportunity.
Awesome. So I hear a lot of interest in solving problems and in moving forward. And we all joined the Center of Innovation with that intention, right? The mission of accelerating innovation in the construction industry. So what made you decide to tackle innovation in the AEC industry?
Well, actually, the answer is pretty similar in terms of, so in healthcare, for example, that's our job, is to create opportunities to improve health. And so what got me excited about that is because the Aec industry has an incredible responsibility to that and an opportunity to make a difference to healthcare, not just in creating great architecture, great hospitals, great clinics, and great spaces, but really, when you really think about what it takes to meet an owner's mission and their responsibility and for us, for teaching, for healing. So architects and builders have a great opportunity to really impact that experience for our patients. And so it's bigger than the building, it's bigger than the design, but it's really the contribution they can make to how do they participate in making a better environment for our patients. And so that's what's really attracted me to innovation. Is so then how do we start to think about all the things that are going on in the industry? And we'll talk a little more about those. But how does architects bring those together in a way that can really move forward how we can improve our ability to provide health to our patients?
Angel.
Yeah, sure. I was waiting for the prompt. That's why I was actually pause there. But yeah, I'm in the same place. I'm naturally curious and, always trying to solve problems the way that Kristine had mentioned. And the subtle difference in, I think, the way that innovators do it is they want to make sure they're solving the right problem. And so they're always sort of looking at, yeah, you asked for this, but maybe there's these other kinds of things that I should be considering at the same time. And so that's kind of where I am, is so when I'm asked to do something, it just starts scaling. I start thinking about it bigger and bigger. And then, trying to figure out, who are the right people to be talking to about those kinds of things. But innovation is the key that unlocks the impacts that I think these kinds of buildings can have in those communities. And so if we're solving one thing, which is maybe providing office space, yeah, you've solved that one problem, but there's other kinds of problems that might be exacerbated because you didn't solve all of them the right kind of way. And so innovation is the thing that kind of unlocks the kinds of impacts, I think, the buildings that we as owners are looking to provide for our clients and customers.
Team, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll add in mine. So I've never been one to shy away from a good challenge, particularly one in which the solutions are derived from the intersection of science, design, and technology, right? That creative process, that free-flowing exploration of ideas and partnership with your peers, right? That kind of blue sky approach is where nothing is really too big or too small. Everything is on the table, and you have the ability to just talk about it out loud with others that are keenly inspired by it as well. That's why I decided to tackle this, is because those kinds of discussions are what help you get through those days or weeks where you sometimes feel beat down by the routine of work, but then you have those kinds of conversations with others, and you are inspired by the ability to make change, right? And to see it happen. And it's like the roller coaster ride, right? It's that inching up to the top very, very slowly, and then that thrill as you scream down the other side, right? That's what makes me want to kind of tackle innovation and change.
So before we move on, I kind of want to frame the conversation, right? We know that the construction industry lags behind other industries when it comes to innovation. That's not big news, right? We're also an industry that we talk a lot about changing, about the need to innovate, but we really struggle to see our aspirations come to fruition, right? So partially it's because we are a very fragmented industry and we are project focused, and we still like to do many things on the traditional way. But I want to frame this a little bit different for this panel, right? I really think that the future is very promising. So if you take a look at how much investment there was in construction technology in the few years, it's incredible, right? Technology is really transforming the way we live and work, and it's demanding us really to stop and to think and figure out what kind of world we want to live in, right? So for those who are in the AEC industry, we're also kind of like in the middle of what some people are calling a rush towards industrialization, where firms are really like rethinking their entire business models to accommodate new demands for innovation, right? And I'm not even mentioning here the whole like aspects, really important topics of concern worldwide, such as climate change, labor shortage, social justice aspects, right? And like we saw in the previous panels in the Ukraine, right? Drastic events that are happening that nobody really thought it was even possible to happen, right? Like the pandemic and the war in the Ukraine. So all of these makes us stop to think what kind of society we want to be in the future. And on a smaller scale, what kind of industry we want to be. So with that in mind, I want to hear a little bit from you guys in the context of your work. What does innovation mean to you? And Kristine, maybe we can start with you this time.
Sure. I feel like I'm a broken record, but for me, the innovation is really about those partnerships and collaborations that we have, and it's bringing in, again, that wide range of experts from research and design and construction and arts and humanities and sciences, all working together to solve the world's most pressing problems, right? And how do we do that in the built environment? How do we make it an inclusive and welcoming place for everyone? How do we start to address all of those issues that you just mentioned? That's what it's really about for me. And it's about taking risks within tolerable limits. Again, being a public institution, you have to be very conscious of the potential issues that you have with just ongoing maintenance and issues like that. But it's really about pushing yourself and others to that place of discomfort almost, right? To have those conversations that are sometimes not easy to have, and addressing some of those issues and concerns that we have within our society, and to make the advances, to experiment, to allow for failure, right? But to learn from that failure, and to just always have that innovative spirit of never giving up. Yeah.
The unfortunate part is now that you can see me. So moving forward. So in terms of what does innovation mean, really, to me, it's really, that's actually a really hard question to answer because it means so many things. So it's not just how do things change, but it's also in terms of because a part of innovation is also the business side. And so, how, for example, and I think within the industry, so how does an organization need to continue to be prepared in terms of their future? So, it's one thing right now what's happening today, and so we're bringing more and more people together in project delivery and having great opportunities of collaboration, and those things making a big difference. But that alone won't really get us to, in my opinion, from the world I'm in, to necessarily innovate. So I think it's really important. So what it means to me is, so how do we get people to move to the edge, to start asking the questions about, so if I could do this, I could make this change, I could make this improvement. And so what innovation means to me is creating that opportunity for people to think, and I'm going to say bigger, I'm not sure that's the right word, but to challenge. And again, not just to make change, because there's 4 types of innovations if you look at the industry's definitions. But it's not just to make change, but it's really to say, as if I'm looking at a problem, I could solve this if this happened, and that if becomes really then the center for innovation. That really becomes the challenge, because now you think about that if, that really ignites, and that's the catalyst for innovation. And that's what it means to me.
Angel, what does it mean to you?
Mine's real easy. It's essential. It's literally essential for us to do our jobs. And the way I think about it really is, it's kind of like water, right? That we all need it. And if you think about how great civilizations have started, they started around big bodies of water. But they're also the most innovative civilizations at that time. That's why they flourished and they thrived, because they were doing things differently than others. And water comes in a variety of different shapes and forms. And so it can be different things for all of us. And what I mean by that is, it can be really radical stuff, right? It can be something crazy, which is not where I spend a lot of my time. But it also can be routine. It can be very small. But as long as it's helping us to improve and get better, then it's good. And I think that's where we need to be. When we think about innovation, it is essential for the way that we're going to move everything forward. And if you just think about the small time, we've been doing our jobs, if you did your job the same way you did it 10, 15 years ago, think how different that was. Just like the iPhone doesn't come out. I don't have one today. I can't even imagine not being able to do all the stuff I do on a smartphone. But in 2006, it didn't exist. And that's what innovation does. Innovation is sometimes big like the iPhone, but sometimes it's much smaller. Like for me, I remember when I was a kid and there was no like caller ID. I picked up every damn phone call I got, and I didn't want to pick up some of them. But now I'm like, oh, that's Patricia. She wants to talk. And I could either pick up or not pick up. But it's little things sometimes, and the little things add up and they make a big deal. But for me, innovation is essential for us to continue to thrive and get better, not only in our business, but as people.
Exactly, that's true. So I wanna ask you guys a different question now. I want to talk about well, first, let's go to some examples, right? That really gives really mean about innovation. And Angel, I want to start with you. In your opinion, who is making the greatest advancements in innovation in our industry, right? And what are they doing?
Yeah. I thought about this in a variety of different ways. So my answer is, there isn't one person or one group in my mind, right? It's a collective of people. So it's not one, but we're all building off of each other's works, right? We're all learning from each other, and it's shaping the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So I think it's this big collective of people that are really pushing the industry. And that's why you need something like the Center of Innovation to start pulling these people and ideas together, because we're just going to create more. And if I think about what's changed for me, a lot has been about, the way that we've been able to leverage technology to maximize the value of the data that we've been able to get. I think for a long time we've had data, but we didn't know how to use it. Now we're able to figure out how to use it, and technology is helping to do it. If I think about the way that we've got things with, the way that machines are able to learn, and how we're able to predict behavior or predict, have some more predictive modeling. Those are the things that are most interesting to me right now, because then it starts to shape. If we get a sense of how we might do something, then we get a sense of how we might want to build something. But I think the way that we're using data in all sorts of different ways is the thing that's been most exciting for me.
Oh, that's true. It is changing, and it's changing.
Super fast, yeah.
Stuart.
Sure. So in some ways similar, but different a little bit is, so the way I look at this question is, so there's a whole array of great innovations like in products and software, startups, tools, robotics, AR, AI, so and so. It just the list is really extensive. Well, one example, I think, and maybe two examples, in terms of products, I mean, LED lighting has just, one of the most recent ones has really made a significant difference in how our impact to energy, our impact to our environments, our ability to experience our environments completely differently. It's a huge innovation, just incredible. So, similar, to that, 3D printing has made, and we're not even, we're on the frontier of 3D printing. And so these are just huge examples, I think, of great advancements. I would agree with Angel. It's not specific to one firm, one name, but it's really these. And I don't want to call these silos, except in a way I do, because I think the other really great achievement in our industry is starting to really understand collaboration and to really work together to try to figure out how all of these different industries, even because they're different business models completely, how do we start to bring those together? And you start to see it on a project basis, but how do we get beyond one project to more projects? And I think collaboration is the glue that's actually going to really accelerate innovation.
Kristine.
I will echo what my colleagues have both said here, is that I don't think that I could point to a single group. I think that it is a collaboration amongst all, and I think that we are stronger because of each other, and how we all learn and grow from the work of the people around us. I will say that for me, working at an institute of higher education and a public research institute at that I am always looking to them for what are the innovations in which they're creating that can apply to the work that I do, or can apply to and expand to the physical presence of the university environment. And so I really am looking at those kinds of research activities and the partnerships that they are engaging in with private industry in order to make those advancements, right? So areas like Stuart mentioned, in AI and robotics and construction innovation and resiliency and the health of design build teams, right? All of that exploration and research that is going in and being done through the university itself. I think that's where I'm always looking, and making sure that as we're thinking about the built environment, that we're expanding and understanding the goals and the visions of everyone as they utilize those types of spaces.
Yeah, what I hear you guys saying is increased collaboration, better use of data, right? Things like machine learning, 3D printing, that we are all rushing to get better at and to understand how to make the benefits to fruition, right? So really, for us as GCs, right, in the construction industry, innovation is no longer a differentiator, right? It's almost like become a necessity to survive in the industry. So I want to ask you guys, from an owner's perspective, what is the value of investing in innovation? Because I'm taking from the perspective, it might be a bit different. We need to survive. So there is a lot of investment from the GC perspective in trying to figure this all out. But from an owner's perspective, what is the value of investing in innovation?
Yeah.
Stuart,
Yeah, sure. Sorry. So thank you. So I think the answer is probably in part of it is in your question in terms of in healthcare. I'll just speak for that because that's my world right now. But really continuously to be prepared, because we don't know what the future is. And so by ignoring innovation, ignoring what's going on in the market and products and those other things we've already mentioned, ignoring those, we will not be prepared for whatever the future is. And so that's clearly reason to invest in it. I think the other is so specific, as an example to my industry, is so how do we improve patient outcomes? And so we're not gonna be able to do that unless, because, as we just know from COVID, just came out of nowhere in a sense. And so there's a patient income outcome that we have to be prepared for. And what's the next one? And so if we don't invest in innovation and new thinking and care models and technologies, and protocols, and again, in collaborative efforts, we won't be prepared for whatever that future is. So that's why we need to invest.
Joel, do you wanna?
Yeah, I think we've all talked a lot about the value of innovation, which then suggests why we should invest in it. And so if we look at it the other ways, is, what's the cost of not investing in it? Because I think that's where a lot of people think, well, that sounds expensive. Maybe I just don't do it. And the real issue is that, as owners, it's not like we're building brand new buildings all the time, and as a consultant, how many headquarters are you doing for the same client? Not that many, right? And so if you're developing a building or a platform for somebody for 50 years, you got to make sure you're building them the right one that can make those kinds of adjustments over that time period, and that it can flex with them in the way that they need to. And that's why innovation is important to invest in, is because if you understand the same way that Stuart had kind of mentioned, if you understand the kinds of things that you want to achieve with your building, how it supports you, and you understand its duration, then you can start getting a better sense of, how that building is going to, what that building really needs to be. Imagine today, maybe over where Stuart lives, is if you're building, multi-story structured parking, you might be building the wrong thing in 50 years, right? And so you probably still need it today, but then you have to start thinking about, hey, what are ways that I can use that in the future, and you have to plan that in now. Otherwise, you're building in obsolescence for whatever you're producing, and buildings are the second biggest expense all of us have, and so you got to make the right kinds of investments, and investing in innovation is critical for the success of any owner.
Yeah, as a university and a large landholder with our own utilities, we're like a small city, right? And so what I see the value of innovation for a university is that we have the ability to serve as an example, right? We have the brightest minds. We can leverage those brightest minds, not only on our campus, but also in our design profession that is local, that is a product of the university in and of itself. So I think that really the value for us to invest in it is to inspire others around us, that we have an ability to have a not only a local impact, but a regional and a global impact that can help others understand how to approach these issues, how to approach these problems. We're looking at decarbonization of our power plant, massive undertaking, right? But has implications that can be replicated elsewhere and has been done elsewhere, right? And that we don't have to, we do have to keep reinventing the wheel, but we can do it together and with others. Or, protecting of our salmon habitat because of the warming waters of our lakes, and how do we ensure that, food sovereignty for others around us. So there's so many different ways in which we can serve as examples, and to help others really understand their role in innovation as well.
So yesterday, we kind of heard a little bit about how Bosch thinks about innovation, right? And kind of like a little bit how they are organized internally to make sure they are looking ahead and see what's coming. So I want to hear a little bit about your organization. How do you or your organization think about innovation, right? What are some initiatives that you've been able to influence or see in your organization towards innovation? And Kristine, you are in an university setting, right? And you mentioned that all this collaboration with the research, academia, and so on. What's happening there? Like, what kind of initiatives do you guys have, or you've been engaged with? Let's start with you.
Sure. Sometimes it's overwhelming because it's all around, and I'm introduced to new things constantly. And so for me, it's this big puzzle, right? Of how do you take that initiative that's over here that doesn't feel related, but it is, right? And you find those points of intersection amongst all of these initiatives that are happening around the university, and pull them in and have it affect the work that I'm responsible for performing at the university. So I think that's where I am really getting the inspiration and thinking about innovation in a university setting. And it's, really from everything, like I said, the team health of a design build team is so critical, as Stuart's mentioning, just, global health in general, but it's also just those people who are doing the work and ensuring that they're being supported in that, and then, and pulling in these other efforts. So for us, one of the biggest initiatives we have ahead of us, like I said, is that decarbonization of our power plant. That's a massive one that will create impact across the entire campus. So I see it as a tremendous opportunity as well, right? Of how do we demonstrate what we're doing? How do we showcase it? How do we educate others through it? It's just kind of an exciting time right now. And for me, that, my biggest thing is, how do I help support it from a financial perspective, right? How do we make sure that we're out there and we're getting the resources that we need in order to do it in the way that we believe we need to be?
So I'm going to answer this in two ways. So first of all, Kristine, I totally share everything you just said in terms of where at the university level we're wrestling with exactly the same issues. So I really appreciated how you said that. So I'm going to actually take it in a more personal direction, which is, so my interest in innovation started actually with a sign on a cement truck that said, find a need and fill it. And so that's actually been probably my whole career is based on a cement truck. But where I'm going with this now is project delivery. So I was hired basically to, how are we going to deliver our projects? And that's been my career for the last zillion years. And so I worked for a private organization where I did have that opportunity to really introduce the whole idea of integrated project delivery. It wasn't called that then at that time, but basically bringing, as you all know, bringing contractors, architects, subcontractors, vendors, suppliers in from day one. And that was in the private world. And so the question though is, how did that organization think about that? They didn't. They just weren't watching. They weren't looking. So I had a unique opportunity to just create that. And it's been a huge opportunity in terms of now design construction around my own interest. But the same is true in the public world. So I think, where we've been now invested and been looking now in the public world is, how do we start moving away from risk? How do we start thinking differently about risk? How do we start thinking contractors not the enemy? And so when I look at this question, I'm looking at, well, how does our organization think about innovation? They think about it as whatever comes up. They don't think about it as so much, except for what Kristine said, we do think of that. But it gets down to day-to-day of project delivery. It's up to the individual. It's up to the leaders of the individual projects. And that's what we're working on here at UC, is how do we get UC to think about it?
I've got two stories to share with regard to my organizations, because I've only been at GSA for months, so I don't have a lot to share in terms of impact there. But, innovation is one of those things that it just can't be, if you're serious about it can't be other duties as a side, right? It can't be part of your side job. It has to be something that you're focused and committed to. And so at GSA, there are groups of people that are completely focused on just innovation, research and development, those kinds of things, to help the entire organization improve. And they're focused on learning more about emerging technologies and piloting things, and then figuring out ways to implement them on any variety of skills and projects. And so GSA has been attractive to me in that way, because they've been focused on innovation for a very long time. And in my last job at the Department of State, it was more of other duties assigned as opposed to a focus group. And so what I'm most proud of there is really carving off resources so that you can have dedicated people to investing time into research and innovation and developing initiatives, those kinds of things. And one of the things that kicked off over there was Embassy 2050, which is a big umbrella kind of conversation about all the things that we need to learn in order to provide the right platform in 2050. And that's kind of what you started off with when we first had this conversation is, what are going to be those drivers that are going to be impacting the built environment? And you started to talk about population, urbanization, climate, technology, resource scarcity, those kinds of things. And so then how is that going to change the way that, my clients who use those buildings are going to be working? And then how does it shape the building? So that's a big umbrella conversation, but it's led to a whole lot of different kinds of improvements there. And so now that resides over there, and I'm very proud of it. And then from it has been a whole bunch of things that have come out to make those sort of diplomatic platforms sort of evolve for what there will be in the future.
So let's talk about, like you said, Angel, 2050, right? What's the vision for 2050? And maybe we start with you, right? So how do you envision things being on let's look at the advances that we've had in the last 5 years. And so what's coming next in the next 10 years or perhaps even next 30 years, right? So what's your understanding of that?
Well, I think the last couple of years have told us you don't need an office to do your job, right? And so what we need of buildings is going to be quite a bit different. And, narrowly, I know that today the way that we use buildings is really for collaboration opportunities and for connection, but not for work in that very specific kind of way. And so I think we're going to be really thinking hard and differently about what buildings will be. And so as we move out, buildings are going to be much more dynamic, I think, in the way that they work with us, the way that we interact with them. And it's not going to be narrowly a place where we keep all the desks, you know what I mean? It's going to be something quite a bit different. And the way that they impact communities are going to be different. The way that they interact with the cities are going to be different. And so my expectation for buildings in the future is, like I said, they're going to be much more dynamic. We're going to be able to predict what we need out of them. And they're going to be contributors. Right now, they do very, very focused things, but I think they're going to contribute in a lot of different kinds of ways that, for someone that needs a building, the buildings are going to adapt and flex for them the way that they need to for these different kinds of programs or projects or whatever. And they're going to be contributors to climate, contributors to social kinds of things differently than they are today.
Stuart, do you wanna share with us your vision for 2050? How do you think the industry is going to be by then, and how that's going to impact our buildings?
Well, actually, I wish I knew, but I'm not sure I have a prediction about the buildings other than. So I think about a couple of things that. So right now, the way I sort of see the world is that for example, the product group in their industry is trying to make business models around products, and the same as certainly software companies, and it goes on in terms of materials and companies that make products, and there's a lot of, in essence, silos, for lack of a better word, of that's moving. But they're all moving in the direction of continuing to improve their products, to increase and to use new technologies to do that. So when I think about that, what does that mean in the future? So what does that mean? So when those start to collide together and create new platforms of innovation, because I think that's what's going to happen, is these are going to start to merge. And then, you might think this is a little silly, but examples of that are the cartoons, are the comics, in the sense that if you think about the Dick Tracy watch, right? 50 years ago, these technologies didn't merge. Now we have the Apple Watch. So it merged all those technologies to create that. Well, what's that going to mean in terms of buildings? Well, I think it's going to mean buildings that are probably not at all like what we're doing right now, in terms of, for example, in health. I think a lot of buildings in health are probably going to be much smaller and much different, very, very, very specific. And a lot of home care will actually be the future of health. So that healthcare buildings are going to change, I think, significantly to just areas of very, very traumatic care, and versus a lot of care will actually be delivered to your house. So I think buildings in that sense really change in terms of the health code. To the other sides of the industry, I really don't have a way to, I don't have a lot of thought about that, other than I think all of these industries, in order to work by collaboration, are going to merge, and they're going to create advances that that what you're seeing, and this is why I say it sounds silly, but what you're seeing in terms of the comic books and Star Wars, I think that is the future. I think the futurists are predicting that, and I think they're right.
Kristine.
Sure. So when I think about the future, it's hard because as Angel said, right, we have seen such a significant change in just the last few years, just given this pandemic and this shift to this virtual world and in which we're all living. And so when I think about what the future has, it's my roots are in New England, right? So I think of the old warehouses and the flexibility of those old warehouses spaces, right? Where they're just a skin in a shell, and the interiors just adapt and change constantly. And so I look at how do we create buildings that have that sense of flexibility. We have some beautiful historic buildings on our campus, but they are so limited in what you can do within the exterior walls. And so I see the need to really shift to buildings that are less specific to the programs that are in them today and are easy to adapt to that future that we don't know what it is. And I think that we have just seen it again and again and more rapidly in recent years of the need to be able to be flexible, to be nimble, to be able to adapt the spaces in which we work. So I see a shift away from the glamour of the aesthetics and more about the functionality of the building envelopes, about the structural systems, about the actual systems within the buildings, and that ability for them to shift and change and evolve based on the uses that occur within that need to occur within the buildings themselves, and the shift in the research that we have, or the type of learning that we have that embraces both the in-person and the virtual.
So I'm actually reading here some of the questions from the audience, from Zig, which is actually very related to the question that I was gonna ask next. So Zig says, today, projects are procured on known first costs, right? How do you see the selection and contracting process for projects changing to have a life cycle mindset, providing criteria for project teams to address with innovation? So it's that whole aspect, right? How are these changes that are coming up? Will that impact the way we are currently procuring buildings or selecting teams, or even is it going to change something on the policy level? So what are your thoughts? Angel, I see you is my
Yeah. The answer is yes. It will change all of those things. The reality is 80% of our costs for an owner are born after ribbon cutting. So the kinds of things that when I'm making a selection, I have to consider all of those. So part of what we should be asking is not only is what is the cost of the buildings, what we believe the total life cycle costs are. Now the reality is there are things that we can do to improve those numbers. And so, but we have to understand them. So when you're looking at options, yeah, you should be looking at what is going to be the life cycle cost of those kinds of things. You should be looking at, how's it going to be maintained, all these other kinds of things, because, they might be introducing materials that might be bad for you or hard for you to procure in the future, you have to store. And so you have to be thinking about what it means to maintain them. And so, yes, the way that I do it, at least, and coming from state, the conversation, the full life cycle cost was a big part of that. And it's something that I want to be introducing in all of the conversations that I have is when we're designing a building, I want to be thinking about it in that 50-year platform and the costs for executing. Are there special skills that are being required to maintain it or whatever it is? So yeah, you have to think differently about the kinds of things you do. And it also influences the kinds of designs that you might be focused on. And Kristine, I agree with you. It's not about the aesthetic, right? But that the way that someone solves those performative and sort of functional problems results in some kind of aesthetic. I'm cool with that. Now, I just moved to Chicago, and right now it's cold for me, and I put on a jacket. But I put on a very specific jacket because I wanted to represent me. So I can put on anything, but I put it on something that also keeps me warm and represents me. And that's kind of like, you pull all those things together and you can probably produce something that's, now we're talking buildings, produce something that's probably the right thing for you, because it's solving all those performative functional things and then represents you in the way that is where kind of speaks to what your values are as an organization.
Sorry, to say thanks for the question. I think part of your question is, so how do we adjust our budgets in the capital budgets to allow for the value of really the future operating costs and the life cycle costs. And so, I think in the private world that should be easier. I think the public world, it's mixed in terms of how they interpret the public contracting code. So I know it's a question I think we all struggle with on the public side. Because there's a difference between capital dollars and expense dollars. That doesn't change the question. I think in terms of, I think it's an appropriate question. So how do we start thinking about budgeting, and how do we start thinking the value of the dollar in this case, in the UC system? How do we start to really think about how do we budget our projects in a way that allows us to be prepared for the life cycle costs as well, and the advantage, in other words, the advantage that we will receive from thinking about life cycle costs. So there's not a simple answer to your question, but I think that the future needs to do that. The future has to do that, because for us, when we build a building in our net, the project we're doing right now is $5 billion. In 18 months, our operating costs will have exceeded that $5 billion. So we have to find a way to figure out how to get life cycle costs into our initial budgets. So appreciate the question. We're working on it. We don't, at least the UC system right now, we don't have an answer for that. That I'm aware of.
This is a great question, because it's one that we, as an owner, struggle with all the time, right? Of how do we ensure the future of these buildings that we're building, right? And so for we have a over $3 billion deferred maintenance, right? So we're constantly looking at how we sustain these buildings into the future. So what I would say from a contracting perspective is finding teams that understand and can balance the technological advances with the value that they add to a project, and the ability for a public institution to be able to sustain those technologies. And that's a really hard thing for, in our case at the University of Washington, with our staff, with our existing staff, who they can maintain a pump system that's been in a building for 100 years, but the new one that just put in, that is all, it's people who understand computers and technology, right? It's a completely different skill set. And so I think what I'm looking for in consultant teams and procuring contracts with consultant teams is that understanding of what it takes from an owner's side to sustain those systems, and helping to bring the university and their staff, their maintenance staff, along, and making sure that there is that commitment from the university side that those are the skill sets that you need to be reinforcing within your staff itself.
Yeah, I want to ask one final question. I know we are like almost like 2 minutes, but I think it's a worthwhile question. And my question is really something that bugs me. Is that aspect of innovation in a project level and innovation in a programmatic level, or even in a policy level, right? So if we look, I was like impressed by some projects that they have in the UK, where they are partnering with several departments in the government to understand what are the opportunities for us to move into a kits of part approach, right? So they are looking into a pipeline, and that's also like the dimension is completely different, right? Because they are looking now into a pipeline of 50 billion pounds worth of public buildings, right? And they did some analysis, which I thought it was amazing. Like out of that, all this pipeline, they understood that 70% of the spatial content actually had similarities in geometry, which is very easy to put into a platform or to create a kit of parts. And they also found out that 30% of space is actually it's for general use areas, right? It's circulations or toilets or corridors. So that's like 30%. So there is a huge opportunity there also to standardize and componentize these kind of buildings. I wanted to hear a little bit of your perspective from the context that you're in, right? What are the barriers for us to move from a project level kind of innovation to really like a programmatic or even policy level innovation? And I want to start with you, Angel, because you are, you know, it looks like that you've been thinking about that as well.
Well, what's funny is we've had the same conversations with the UK too, to understand what they're doing, you know, at the sort of big public level, because I thought it would be completely appropriate for the government to sort of think about the same kind of thing. But the trick really is you've got to separate those two apart, the policy, the programmatic piece and the project piece. You know, I'm sure all of us are in the same place with projects that are really kind of tight budgets and tight schedules. And so that's really not the right place to be trying to be innovative in that way that it's not been fully resolved and understood. And then separate from that, you know, dedicated resources to try to figure out what does work and what doesn't work, piloting it and testing it so that when a project comes up, it's already been prepared to introduce and implement. That's really the key for me. And we've, on some projects, we've tried to be innovative when we weren't prepared, and it was a big mistake for us. And I'm talking about the government as a whole, but there is a way to do that on the side in parallel with people that's their sole purpose, and then start to implement it on projects in the right kind of way. And that's what the UK did. The UK's pulled off on the side, trying to figure out how to do it, and then they're going to start to implement it on projects, which I think is the right way.
Just real quickly, I know we're just at about time, but so my experience in that is basically, first of all, it really did, it makes a lot of sense that theoretically you can standardize a lot of these things. And I think, for example, if you have a top-down organization and a system, because I think it's system-wide, it's not project by project individually, it's a system decision. Top-down has a better opportunity to standardize and the kind of statistics that you just quoted and be able to manage their capital program in that. And now the flip side, if you have an organization that is from the bottom up, then standardization is much harder because there's a lot of interpretation about practice, about protocol, about procedures, which could be different, or at least are considered to be different. So I think the answer to the question is, so, you know, what organization are you in? Are you top down or are you bottom up? And then what's the opportunity to standardize within those two different models? Because I believe it is different.
Kristine, do you want to add? Would you like?
Sure. I'll just add, you know, a slightly different approach at the university is, you know, we have our design guidelines, but we also have a group. I'll point to our sustainability committee, which is, again, it's composed of faculty members and staff members from across the university, and developing green building standards that go above and beyond code, right? And putting those into policy and practice so that as design teams come in, they need to aspire and meet those goals and aspirations that are part of that, as well as establishing committees that are solely focused on particular parts of the campus, whether that's the innovation district that we have, where we're partnering with private industry, but really trying to you know, engage in those conversations about who do we want to be, what do we want to achieve, and so having those kind of high level conversations, and it's the integration of those two that come together from the you know, just the discussion around who we want to be, and then what are the standards that we want to implement through policy.
Please, just to wrap up, would you have a word of advice for those who are starting off in like innovation, who want to move a step forward? What word of advice would you have? it can be for the industry, it can be for the owner side.
I've got one thing. Engage with the Center for Innovation. There's a lot of people already getting together to talk about the stuff, but it is really just trying to find like-minded people that are trying to solve similar kinds of problems, and they're all out there. And I think the Center for Innovation is one of those places where a lot of them come together, and so it's a great place to start.
No, that's great. So Angel, that's a great answer. So, and I would just add to that I think the single greatest thing I've learned about it is the more that we can get people when faced with a problem to answer the question, I can do this if, and focus on them solving the if. And that I think is also Center of Innovation, certainly can focus on that as well.
Kristine?
Yeah, it's hard to top Angel's answer, certainly. For me, SCUP, Society of College and University Planning, that's a huge place for me to go to understand what my peers are doing. I think being open when somebody calls you and says, how did you do this? To have that conversation with them, because you're not just helping them, but they're also teaching you at the same time. And so I think it's just being open and to engage with your peers across, at other places. And I think, the three of us here, or four of us, all of us here on this panel, just having these kinds of conversations helps you to understand and kind of look beyond what you're familiar with. And it just kind of opens your eyes to new opportunities.
I think that's amazing. So open-minded, focus on the if, right? Don't let yourself get bogged into some small hiccups. And join the Center for Innovation. I love it. Thank you so much. I would really, I don't have words to say how, like, my appreciation for you guys taking your time of the day to actually come here and chat with us. You guys were very inspirational. Thank you so much for your participation again. And Marty, I'm going to pass it to you. Thank you very much.
Well, I'd really like to thank Patricia for doing such a great job at moderating this wild panel, and Stuart, Angel, and Kristine for giving us your heartfelt and really brilliant insights. I think it's a really wonderful way for us to end this last session of the Center for Innovation's Fall Forum. So our deepest thanks to all of you for spending the morning with us. You've inspired us and given us great insights into your challenges. And I think understanding your challenges helps the field improve so very much. So as we close our fall forum for 2022, we want to extend our thanks to Bosch for sponsoring today's webinar. And as always, thanks to Katie Olson, who helps keep us all on track. This webinar will be recorded and placed on YouTube. And for those of you who prefer podcasts, we now offer the option of listening to our webinars. You can find a listing on Spotify or wherever you subscribe to podcasts. The next Center for Innovation webinar will feature Yale professor Phil Bernstein discussing machine learning and artificial intelligence, opportunities and threats to design practice, and that will take place on October 14th. The event is free. Just be sure to register on our website, centerforinnovation.org. Thanks again for joining us today and being part of our community of innovators. We'll see you next month.